hello, welcome. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Bonnie. I manage the support team and have been with Artsman for almost 15 years now, so quite some time. And today we're going to be taking a look at theater maps inside the software. So we'll be starting with a very basic map, taking a look at its configuration, the different layers and how we build a map, and ending up with our final product. Theater maps are very important because they are the foundation of all that we do when it comes to ticket sales. They govern what a reserved seating map looks like. They also dictate what our price points are going to be for our map and our seating capacity. And we have a lot of clients that are building new maps as they're coming back from our break that we've had here. And so sometimes they're moving into new venues, other times they are constructing new maps based on their existing venue, but altering those spaces in order to create social distance, either social distance seating or to reduce capacities with inside venues. So we're going to take a look at how we might build a map from scratch and talk about some of the key elements and features along the way. I'm going to turn on my screen sharing here. And we should all be looking at a map. This is the map that we're going to be building today. So this particular map has a theater in the round shape to it. I know each of our venues are different. Each of our venues have different sizes as well, but the same concept is going to apply regardless of what we're working with. So when we're going to build a map, the very first thing we need is an actual drawing or something to work off of that's going to tell us what our seats look like. And if you don't have a drawing, mapping something out yourself, even on a piece of paper, as to what the venue is going to look like is often very helpful because it gives us a point of reference to come back to. As we can see here, we have different rows within this venue. We have row A over here on the left-hand side, B, C, D, and then we work our way from E, F, G, H, and then J, K, L, M. You notice that there isn't an I. Often rows I and row O are not included in maps, depending on the size of the venue. And what that does is helps to ensure that we don't have a character in our seat names or our maps that might look like another value. For example, an I can look like a 1 or a 0 might look like an O. So it's very common within venues to have that type of configuration. All right, this is going to be our starting point. And so we are going to minimize this and take a look at what we're going to be doing in Theater Manager. I'm also going to tuck this away because we're not quite ready for that just yet. So I've got a copy of our map here in the background so that way we have it for visual reference. We're going to come into Theater Manager and we are going to start by clicking on the venue button up at the top of the window. It looks like a paint easel. Depending on your database, you may have renamed this particular button. So look for the paint easel icon. It is going to take you to the correct location in the software. When we click on that, we're going to get our venue list window, and this allows us to insert new venues into the space. We'll also see a list of all existing venues. So if you already have a venue for your map, for example, you're creating a new configuration for an existing space that you've historically used, feel free to open that venue and add your map directly to that venue. For those of us that are creating a brand new space, we can click on the new button up at the top of our venue list window, and we can enter our venue information. So for our purposes, we are going to call this the WT Theater. And we're just going to have the same name in both our internal and external fields. Whenever we build a new thing inside Theater Manager, we often have an internal and external value. Our external is what the general public is going to see, and internal is what we use. So we can have a short name or a completely different name for reference inside the database that we use internally. The address populates with the information from our company preferences. If we need to update this information, we can go ahead and do that now. And we're going to leave those details as they are, but we are going to come down here and we're going to concentrate on this field called the fire rated capacity. The fire rated capacity is a very important field. It dictates the number of seats that can be in our map. So this is often what the fire marshal has said a particular space is allowed to hold for its maximum capacity. And so we want to enter this value here so that way we know what our limit is going to be when it comes to building our maps. For our particular map today, our limit is 101 seats. So we're going to go ahead and put that in. And now that we have that value in there, we can click the save button up at the top of the window, and that saves our venue into the database. I'm going to close this just so we can see it here in the background. And there's our venue inside our venue list window. We can have as many different venues as we like inside the database, and it's basically a way of grouping together different spaces. So as we create a map for the WT Theater, we could also have several configurations of them. And as I said before, if you already have the venue set up inside your database, feel free to go ahead and add another map directly to that venue. You don't need to create a new venue for each map. Okay. Now that we have our venue ready, we're going to head over to the right-hand side here and click on the new button to add in our new map. When we click on the new button, Theater Manager pops up a brand new window for us, and this is where we're going to be doing the majority of our work today. There are some required fields inside this window, and that's what we're going to focus on. The very first is our internal and our external name for this particular map. So again, we're going to put in WT Theater, and we might have a different configuration for this theater. Maybe this is our theater in the round configuration. This is a black box space, for example. We might have tiered or stadium seating, and then we might have a theater in the round. So we might do theater round, just as a little note for ourselves so that internally we know this is the theater in the round configuration as opposed to our stadium seating. I'm going to go ahead and click into our external field, and what you'll see is that it copies the name down into this field for us, so we don't have to type it twice. We don't need the general public to know that this is our theater in the round, so we're just going to take that piece off the end. Moving through, this is an active map. If we do have old maps that we don't use anymore, we can come in and make them inactive simply by unchecking this box. It means that they're not going to show up when we're building events and can make things a little bit cleaner. We don't want to delete those old maps because they're a part of our history and relate to events that may have taken place in the past. So we keep them, but we archive them in the database by making them inactive. Theater Manager's already populated our physical seats. We have 103 seats that we're going to be working with in this particular space, and it's populated our reporting capacity. The difference between our physical seats and our reporting capacity is that the physical seats are the number of seats Theater Manager is anticipating we're going to sell. When we move forward in our process and we're placing seats, Theater Manager will allow us to place a maximum of 101 seats. The reporting capacity governs our buy button online. So when we look at the buy button, you'll notice that it changes color. It becomes orange as we sell more seats and get to the 85% threshold. And when we're at 95%, it starts counting down the number of tickets that are still available in the venue for us. This is to encourage our patrons to purchase tickets before the venue or before the event sells out. So we can adjust this capacity if we wanted to in order to show our patrons that the venue is more full or filling up faster if we choose to. It's a great marketing tool to encourage people to buy faster. You'll also notice that over on the right-hand side, we have exclude queue holds. We want to include the queue holds in our count of sold seats online. Queue holds are primarily used for our social distance seating in Theater Manager. And so we want to ensure that our queue holds are included in our count so that when we're doing our math, Theater Manager will add them to our sold count and properly tell our patrons when we've sold out our venue. Next up, we have price codes. So in our price codes field, we're going to put 1, 2, 3, ABC. The price codes that we put in here really depend on the configuration of our venue. If we take a moment and go back to our map, we'll just pull this forward again. We can see that there doesn't really look to be any tiered pricing, and this is a relatively small venue, so chances are good that we don't need to set up a tiered system within this particular space. However, if we were going to have different pricing, perhaps for the left versus the center and the right section, we might decide that we're going to assign price codes 1 and A to the left, price codes 2 and B to the center section, and price codes 3 and C to the right-hand side. This now means that those price codes are specific to those sections, and we can govern what the price value is going to be for those particular areas in our venue. For our example today, we're not going to worry about doing that type of tiered seating. We're going to focus just on giving every seat inside the venue the same price. All right. So if we were generating a general admission event, we would only need to put in these details and click on the Save button up at the top of the window. This would save our map and we would be ready to move forward with creating our events. However, for today's example, we're going to be creating a reserved seating map and we need to move further into our sales process, our setup process. I'm going to click on our Save button here, and when we do, we can see that the Graphic Map tab opens up, giving us an opportunity to add more content to this particular map. All right, I'm going to close out of this because I've done some preparation in advance. And behind all of these wonderful fields, I have hidden some maps that are going to help us move through the process just a little bit quicker. Okay, so down here we have a map that's set up. This is going to be our SVG map. We're going to go ahead and add our SVG image into this particular map. Now, when we come to our graphic map tab, we can see that it starts off with a white background. We need to create 2 layers in this particular area. We need to create our background image, which tells Theater Manager what patrons should be seeing apart from our seats. And then we're going to layer on top of that the seats inside of our venue. Our seats can be circles or squares, depending on your venue setup, but they're generally gray in color, and we'll get an opportunity to see those in a few moments. So at this point, we're going to step away from Theater Manager. We're going to pull our map up here. And what we want to do is recreate this particular image outside of Theater Manager and prep it as an SVG file. For our support team, we do a lot of this particular work in PowerPoint. I'm going to open up our PowerPoint image again here. And so a little bit earlier, I went through and built an SVG file. This is a collection of shapes, what we see here as our seats, lines, and text boxes. When we're generating our text boxes, we want to make sure that we have individual boxes for each line. This helps with spacing when we're generating our SVG file. And we want to put in the details that we feel are relevant. If we look at this image inside the PowerPoint compared to what our image looks like here in the background, we have the outline of the venue so that way patrons know how close they're going to be to the walls in the space. We have our letters indicating each of the rows, and we have these little dots indicating some holes within this particular venue. We also have the outline for the stage to give our patrons an understanding of where they're going to sit in relation to the stage itself. You'll notice that we haven't put in our numbers for our seats. This is a lot of extra information to add and can take up a lot of space on our map. If we leave that information out of the map, our patrons are still able to hover over top of the seats, much like we can do inside Theater Manager when purchasing tickets, to read the name of the seat as they're looking at the map. So rather than adding that additional content to our map, we keep a much cleaner view by not adding those details and putting in minimal amounts of information that we feel are relevant. So inside PowerPoint, we go ahead and create our image, we add in our seats, we add in the values that we feel are important to our design. And once we have that, we're ready to convert this to an SVG file. When Artsman builds SVG files, we take the file and we use products like OpenOffice to convert our file to an SVG. If you've built your PowerPoint and you don't have OpenOffice or you don't have the ability to install that on your computer, please send your PowerPoint to the support team at support@artsman.com, and we'd be happy to convert the file for you into an SVG file format. I did that a little bit earlier today, so I have a copy of that here on my computer. And I'm just going to pull that up here. And so I have my SVG in the background. I'm just going to pull that from my Finder window, and I'm going to drag it over here into our graphic map tab in the giant white space and drop it into our background. Theater Manager is going to think for a moment, and then it's going to present our image. So there is our converted SVG file. That's just our background. We notice that the seats haven't overlaid on this yet. We'll be doing that in just a moment. We might look at this and say that takes up a lot of space, and we can actually shrink that background and make it a bit smaller by putting values into our fields up here, the SVG map size. We're going to put a value into the width, and because this is a ratio or an aspect ratio, it's going to shrink down the image on both the width and the height. Once we've got our value in there, we can click on our little gear here, which is going to trigger the Theater Manager server to go out and convert or shrink down that image for us. And so it's off doing that task. And once it's gone through and shrunk our image, we're then ready to start placing our seats. I'm going to go ahead and close this because I have another map prepared behind. And so this is our shrunken image here with a couple of seats already placed into the venue. When placing seats, we use the paint bucket here on the left-hand side, the add a grid of seats option. And when we click on this, we can define the number of seats that we want to add, as well as the columns that we want to add them in. So for example, if we were going to place 4 rows of 20 seats, we might change our value to 20, say that there are 5 columns, and Theater Manager will distribute them into 5 seats per row for a total of 20 seats. We also have our spacing, which allows us to create a vertical or a horizontal space within our grid of seats as we add them to our map. So this is our fastest way to place seats. As for adding seats to the venue, we don't worry too much about the order that we're placing them. We just want to make sure that they're sitting in the correct location on top of our SVG and that things are matching up and looking the way that we want them to. I'm going to press cancel here for a moment so we can explore some of the other features. As we place our seats, we may have areas that look very similar. For example, on the right-hand side here in row K, we have 5 seats, and we need to have 5 more seats in row J. The tools on the left-hand side allow us to manage our seats. So we can use tools like the duplicate the selected seat pattern option to duplicate this particular row, and then we can grab our seats and slide them into place. Whenever I'm building a map, I try to place the seats over on the far side, the lower right-hand side or the lower left first, and I work my way towards the top of the map because I know that when I'm adding seats, they tend to add in the upper left-hand corner, and that gives me an opportunity to drag and put them into place where I need them without accidentally overlapping existing seats. If we do wind up overlapping seats, we can simply come in and move those seats around, pulling them off of each other and put them into places we need to. There are also some great tools as we're adding seats to make it easier for us to align them. So for example, we might align or add a couple of seats here. Let's say we'll add 5 seats. And we might decide that these seats are a little bit close together. They don't quite line up the way that we want to. I'm going to put a seat here. I'm going to grab the seat and move it to the right-hand side on top of this seat. And then I'm going to take all of these seats and I'm going to tell Theater Manager that I want to space them between these 2 seats on the far left and the far right. And as we evenly space them, you'll see that they space out over top of the seats and things are a little bit easier rather than me dragging and dropping each seat into place. There may still be a little bit of touch up that we need to do. We can always highlight seats and use the keys, the up and down arrows on our keyboard to move our seats into place or to slide them left or right as necessary. We also have some other great tools. So for example, if we add in 1 seat and we try to line that up with the seats in this row, we might find that as we're moving them around with our mouse, things get a little bit complicated and we can't quite get things to line up properly. We can highlight seats and use the arrows here for alignment to tell Theater Manager to align the seats together. So for example, if we press the down arrow, that's going to align these 2 seats so that they're at the same level. I wouldn't want to use the left or right arrow because that means these 2 seats will wind up overlapping. So instead, I'm just going to use the keys on my keyboard to put the seat into place. Once we have all of our seats in place, we can click on the Save button up at the top of the window, and we're going to move into another map. So I'm just going to close this one so we can see the map behind this. Here we are with a map with all of our seats all aligned the way that we need them to be and everything ready to go. If we decide that we have some seats, for example, our wheelchair seats that we want to define differently, maybe we want to have a different shape for them, we can highlight those seats on the map, and down at the bottom here, we can change the shape to a circle, for example. That helps to define the seats and have them stand out compared to the rest of the seats inside the venue. Now that we have all of our seats ready, we're going to move into our seat names. I'm going to click on our seat names tab, and Theater Manager prompts me to say, do we want to create an empty list of seats? I'll say yes, and Theater Manager will create the table or grid of seats inside our seat names tab. Now that we have this grid of seats, we can choose to go into each of our fields and add the text that we need here. Theater Manager will copy over things like our section, row, and seat configuration as we tab through, or we can choose to export our seat names out into an Excel file format and make changes to them. I'm going to make this number 2, save it into our folder, And then I'm just going to open this up so we can take a look at it. As we create this file, it basically mimics exactly what we have inside Theater Manager. But now that it's in Excel, we can use Excel tools to populate the information faster. For example, this might be our left section. And we can drag that content down to populate the fields quicker, rather than having to type into each individual field or to tab through the fields inside Theater Manager. When we're naming our seats, we generally have a section, row, and seat number. Some organizations will also have a door, depending on the size of your venue, and that indicates which door patrons should be entering in order to get to their seats. Our seat code value is a unique code for each individual seat inside the venue, so we will be populating that information, as well as the best available area and the best index. I'm going to open up a map that I've already prepared with seat names, and we'll just take a look at the values there. Inside our map here, if we start at the top, we can see that we have the left section and move into the center section. We have our rows defined, A, B, C, D. We also have our seat numbers. So these are part of the values that we're going to see when we hover over top of our seats inside our map. We have our unique seat codes, and we have our best available area, as well as our best available index. As we put this information into the system, our best available area is going to tell Theater Manager when our rows change. So we want to tell patrons that if you are sitting in left A6, you should not buy a ticket in left B1 because you will not be side by side. We do this by having the best available area value change, indicating that there is a break or a gap in those seats. Theater Manager uses an algorithm to offer seats using best available index, and then uses our best available area to know when we have a gap or a break in our seats. If we take a look at our venue, we can see that there are some unique situations like row C, where 1 and 2 have a pole, and then there's 3 and 4 beside it. In situations like that, we want to add a unique or defining value to those seats to ensure that patrons are not seated side by side when there may be an obstacle. Another great example of this is a sound booth inside the back of our venue. It may sit between rows, dividing our row in half. If this is the case, then we can have seats on one side of the sound booth have a unique value from the seats on the other side of the sound booth inside our best available area. This will ensure that our patrons do not purchase tickets on opposite sides of the sound booth, leaving them not seated together. It also makes our front of house much happier because they don't have to deal with patron management issues. All right, so now that we have our best available area, we have our best available index ready, we can also add seat notes. So for example, in row A, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are wheelchair seats. We will put a value like 1 or yes into our seat notes use column, indicating that it should be used. And we can type the word wheelchair into the seats as required. We can then copy down details to make it quicker and easier rather than having to manually type them inside our table in Theater Manager. Once we have this all prepared, we are ready to move it into the software. I'm going to close out of our option here, or out of our Excel document, and we're going to come back to Theater Manager and add our seat names. With our seat name file, we can either use our import seat names button up at the top of the window. We can also drag and drop. So we're going to take our Excel document, and I'm just going to drag and drop it here inside of our window and click on our save button. So Theater Manager now has our background, our seats, and our seat names, all of the components we need to have our map ready for sale. There is one final step that we need to take into consideration. So I'm going to go ahead and close this map so we can take a look at that next option. Once we have our seat names in place, we need to ensure that the seats we see on our graphic match up with our seat names. So for example, this should be seat C1. If we hover over top of it, it currently says F3. That's certainly not right. This was the 43rd seat to be placed in this particular map. And when we placed our seats, we didn't pay attention to the order that we placed them because we knew we could come back and address that after the fact. And that's what we're going to do now. we're going to reorder seats inside the map to match the order that we named them. So in our Excel document, we started with row A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We're going to start in row A, highlight our seats, and on the left-hand side, we are coming down to our reorder. We're going to click on our sort selected seat numbers, and this is going to open up a little wizard that will help us assign our seats correctly. So when we look at this, we are numbering our seats from the top to the bottom, not left to right, and we're starting in the right side. This is the right side of our grid. We're starting in the right side, so we are going to go top to bottom, up here in the right-hand corner, and we're going to reorder these seats starting with the number 1. Now that we've done that, theater manager will say this is the first seat, this is the second seat, this is the third, all the way down to the sixth seat inside this venue, or inside this row. Now that we know that this is our 6th seat and we can see that the seat number is number 6, we're going to highlight our next row and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to start by reordering this with the number 7, the next number sequentially, because 6 is already assigned to the last seat in row A. We're going to go top to bottom and we're going to reorder again. That now means that our seat down here at the bottom is row B, seat number 7. We can see that that matches over here with our map that we have, our graphic that we have for our venue. And so now that we know that this is seat number B7, we can also see it's seat number 13. We'll highlight these seats and we'll reorder them so that that way they start with 14 rather than 35. And that now means that our seat here is C1 and C2. It's no longer reporting the seats in row F. We can continue through all of our sections until we have all of our seats named. And we can also grab more seats at any given time. So for example, we might look at a section and say, those seats can be numbered all together. I'm just going to finish this one up. I lost count. Shh, don't tell anyone. We're at 23 here. We're going to reorder. Our last seat here is going to be seat number 33. So 34 will be our next seat. We can grab all of the seats within this section and reorder them together because we know we're going from D to E. And since our last number here was 33, when we do our reorder this time, we're not going to start in the upper corner here. Instead, we want to start with row E, which is in the lower left. So we're going to go to the lower left. And rather than going top to bottom, we're going to go left to right. And so when we put in our value, 33, I may have that off, we'll find out in a moment. When we put in that value, it's going to reorder our seats accordingly. I went too far. Bear with me for a quick moment. I thought I might have had the wrong number. We'll just update this real quick. That should push this seat to be 34 because we've now assigned 33 there. And this becomes E1, E2, E3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And so we can do some spot checks to make sure that our seats align correctly. Here is F11. And again, we can compare that to our map up here on the left-hand side and ensure that everything looks like they're placed and numbered accordingly. And so we go through our entire venue doing that. And providing we know what order we named our seats in, we've done our Excel document, so we do know that quite clearly. This can be a quick and easy task. It gets a little bit more complicated when we aren't able to draw straight lines around our seats. So for example, if you're creating a venue on a curve, it may mean that you need to highlight some of your seats, hold the Shift key on the keyboard and select additional seats to grab them in that arc in order to renumber them. We also suggest being very cautious because when we are renumbering, when we're using our table, if we have an arc of seats and we tell theater manager to start on the far right side, theater manager will do that for us, but it will say that the first seat on this side is equal with the first seat on the opposite side. So it will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 through our arc and work its way down. So you may find it easier to take smaller portions of each row when dealing with curved seating in order to assign your numbers correctly and reorder your seats. All right. So now that we have our seats all numbered, ready to go and everything in order, we are going to move into looking at our best seat search. So when we named our seats, we went through and gave our best available area a starting value that was unique to the sections inside the space. And by doing that, we can use that as a part of our best seat search for online sales. In order to open up the best seat search, we're going to click on our description tab, and we're going to check the box here for enable seat search by section. If we leave this box unchecked, the dropdown does not appear online, but a lot of our clients like to use this feature. So we're going to check that box, click save, and head to our best seat search. We'll click our plus sign in the upper left-hand corner, and we're going to put in our search string. So based on our seat names, we know that all of the seats on the left-hand side start with L. So we're going to type L in our search string here, and we'll say left section. I'm then going to press tab on the keyboard to add another option, and we'll do C for center because that's what defines our center section. And we'll do one more R for right, and that will be our right section. Once we have these in, we can go ahead and click save, and we're almost finished doing or creating the setup of our map. Our final piece is to prepare our map for online sales. So we've gone through and built all of the elements that are needed to view the map inside Theater Manager at the box office, but we also need to make sure that everything is prepared and ready for the web. So in order to do that, we are going to head back to our graphic map. We can do this from any tab, but this is a great visual place to do it. And we're going to click on the button here that says Place Seats SVG Map. This is a wonderful wizard that allows us to overlap our seats with what we are seeing online and the background image. I'm going to just pull this forward. Sorry, that was on my second monitor. And so it walks us through making sure that we have all of the correct settings, and it's going to overlap our seats so that that way we can see what they would look like online. So we're going to allow Theater Manager to use the SVG file that we put in place here. We're going to move into step 2. Theater Manager has a both X and Y axis. So this is how it's gridding the seats over top of that SVG file that we have. We're going to leave our default to begin with and see where our seats lie. We're then going to move into step 3, and we're going to leave all of our defaults here, and we're going to click done. And as we click done, Theater Manager is going to overlap those seats. And of course, on my second monitor, it's going to bring up a browser to show us where our seats fall. So if we look at this by default, we can see that these seats do not line up. We're kind of close over here on this side, but what we need to do is stretch out these seats and make them a little bit wider so that they line up well with our background. So we're going to head back to our map, and we're going to place seats one more time. And we're going to manipulate or change the value in the both X, Y axis. I'm going to increase this to 35 because I have a good feeling about that number. But depending on the size of the background that we created in PowerPoint and what our SVG dimensions are, we may need to play with this value and move it up and down and repeat the step multiple times until we have everything line up just the way that we want it to. I'm going to click on to step 3 and done, giving Theater Manager a moment to create the file. And there we are. That's aligning quite nicely. We can see that the seats on the far right side are looking good, and the seats in the lower right-hand corner are. So that entire seat grid spread out or expanded on the XY axis to overline nicely with our background, which now means that this map is ready and available for us to use for performances online. I'm going to close out of these 2 tabs, and we will come back over here to our map. So our map is pretty much done and ready to go. There are other elements inside our map that we can work with. For example, we can add holds to our map. If we decide that we don't want to issue wheelchair seating, maybe we're not going to offer them online, we can highlight our seats once we've clicked on the hold button up at the top of the window, and we can lock them down as wheelchair seats, preventing them from being available for online purchasing. We also have another very important element here, the social element. This is very commonly used at the moment to create social distance holds around seats. When we're creating our social distance holds, we highlight the seats that are going to be relevant to our hold area. So for example, we might be working with row Q, seat number 1, and perhaps when it comes to our social distance bubble, we only need to hold seats on the left or right side of a particular seat. If that's the case, we would highlight these 2 seats here. We would left click on E, and we would set that as the center point for our social distance hold. We would continue through our row, highlighting the group of seats around each particular seat that we're focusing on, and we would set our social distance hold until every seat inside the venue has the correct radius. This is a process that you need to do for each seat because every venue is different, and some venues have more space between seats where others are a little bit smaller and don't quite have enough space, or you may have unique spaces within your venue where you need to allow more space between your seats or you can get away with less. For example, loges or boxes may be a little bit more forgiving than seats on the main floor. So we can go through and place all of our social distance seats and assign them. We can then come back and we can check our seats by either clicking on them to view what they might look like, or clicking on one seat and using the arrows here on the left-hand side to click through and view what our bubbles look like. And when we don't have a bubble, we can see there are no magenta cue holds around them, so we know that those are seats that still need to be done. As we create our social distance seating, Theater Manager is also updating our seat names. We're going to come back here for just a moment, and we'll scroll down to row E. We can see over here on the right-hand side, Theater Manager's added those social distance seats for us. Great. Hopefully we'll get to a point soon where we don't need social distance seats, so we can use this feature in the same capacity, but it can also be really great for creating distances around seats, and it's commonly used by our dinner theaters. All right, so those are the key elements that I wanted to touch base on today with regards to our theater maps and how to build them and construct them. I know we went through a quick tutorial. I'd like to pause now and see if there's any questions. Don't be shy. I don't see any questions at the moment. If you do have questions after the session, or if there's something that you think of afterwards, feel free to write a comment inside the community at artsman.com post. I will respond back and answer all of the questions that you might have there as well. Any questions that we have from today's session will also be brought over to that area as well, so that way we have a point of reference and you can come back and check on those answers at any time. All right, it looks like we still don't have any questions. Oh, we do have one. Margaret Ann has asked, is the recording available? We are going to look at ways to post this recording up so that way you'll have the ability to come back and view it again in the future. So we will come up with a method for that, and we will post more details on community as to how you can access this video. We will also be hosting more coffee times in the future as well. We'll be putting out some topics and posting more information both on community and inside the 3 Thought Thursday, so you can register for additional sessions. We'd also love to hear your feedback as to what you thought about the flow, so feel free to email the support team and let us know what you thought of the session, and any feedback you might have, we will use to make our sessions even better. All right, since we don't have any questions, I think we'll wrap up here. We were aiming for 45 minutes to an hour, and it looks like we're right on the nose there. So thank you everyone for joining us and participating today. I'm glad you could be here for Artsman Coffee Time, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Have a wonderful day.